What if I told you that during World War II, the United States secretly deployed an entire army? That wasn't really an army at all? No, not robots, not drones, not super soldiers. An army of artists, designers, actors, and sound engineers. Their mission wasn't to fight with guns or tanks, but to trick the Germans into thinking they were facing overwhelming forces that didn't actually exist. They were called the Ghost Army, and their story remained classified for decades after the war. Today, we're diving into the astonishing tale of the Ghost Army World War II's masters of illusion. To understand why such an unusual unit was even created, we need to step back into the chaos of 1944. By this point, the Allies were pushing deeper into Europe after the D-Day landings, and deception was just as valuable as firepower. If you could convince the enemy to send their forces to the wrong place, you could save thousands of lives. Military leaders realized that creativity could be just as deadly as bullets. And so, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was born. That's the official name of the Ghost Army, a unit of about 1,100 men, tasked with creating illusions on the battlefield. But don't let that small number fool you. These men could project the presence of entire divisions, tens of thousands of troops, using nothing but tricks, sound, and imagination. At first glance, the Ghost Army looked like any other American unit. They wore uniforms, carried rifles, and set up camp. But their real weapons were rubber, paint, and speakers. They inflated massive rubber tanks that looked real from a distance, complete with artillery pieces and jeeps. They painted insignias on trucks to mimic famous divisions. And they blasted recorded sounds of tanks rolling, engines revving, and troops marching through giant loudspeakers that could be heard for miles. The Germans, watching and listening, were often convinced they were facing huge American forces. In reality, it was just a small group of artists pulling off the greatest stage show in military history. One of the Ghost Army's most powerful tools was the inflatable tank. Imagine walking into a field and seeing row after row of Sherman tanks, all positioned as if ready for battle. Through enemy reconnaissance planes flying overhead, the illusion was perfect. The tanks cast shadows, reflected sunlight, and seemed to be armed for combat. But if you got close enough, you'd realize you could push one over with your hand. These weren't weapons of destruction, but weapons of deception. The Ghost Army would often set up these decoys at night, moving them quickly from one location to another, making it appear as though US forces were constantly repositioning. This created confusion for the Germans, who wasted valuable time and resources chasing shadows. But visual trickery was only part of the performance. Sound played a crucial role as well. The Ghost Army worked with sound engineers from Hollywood and even sound experts who had worked with radio networks. They recorded every kind of military noise, trucks rumbling, tanks moving, soldiers shouting orders, and blasted them through massive speakers mounted on vehicles. The sound systems were so advanced they could be heard up to 15 miles away. The recordings weren't random either. They were carefully designed to match the visuals on the ground. If inflatable tanks were set up, the speakers played tank sounds. If a fake convoy of trucks appeared, the sounds of engines filled the air. To German spies and scouts, the audio matched the visuals perfectly. The illusion was complete. The Ghost Army didn't stop there. They even engaged in what's known as special effects impersonation. Soldiers in the unit would put on different uniforms and impersonate officers from other divisions. They would casually walk into cafes or villages, talking loudly about where their division was supposedly headed next. Locals would repeat what they heard, and soon enough, the Germans would pick up the rumors. It was psychological warfare at its finest, tricking the enemy into believing false intelligence by planting seeds of misinformation. These little acts of theater could shift the entire movement of German forces without a single shot being fired. Throughout the war, the Ghost Army carried out more than 20 large-scale deceptions across Europe. One of their most famous operations took place along the Rhine River in 1945. The Allies needed to cross the river, but it was heavily defended by German forces. To draw attention away from the real crossing point, the Ghost Army staged an elaborate fake buildup miles away. Inflatable tanks lined the fields, sound trucks broadcasted constant military noise, and fake radio traffic filled the airwaves. The Germans took the bait, diverting their strength to defend the wrong location. Meanwhile, the actual crossing succeeded with far fewer casualties than expected. The Ghost Army had done it again, saving countless lives with nothing more than illusions. What makes this story even more remarkable is who these soldiers were. Many were artists, architects, and designers before the war. Some went on to become famous after it. Fashion designer Bill Blass, for instance, served in the Ghost Army. So did Ellsworth Kelly, who became a renowned painter and sculptor. These men were chosen not just for their military skills, but for their creativity. The US Army recognized that artistry could be weaponized, and in the Ghost Army, it was. Despite their incredible impact, the Ghost Army story was hidden for decades. The unit's work was classified until 1996, meaning most Americans never even knew they existed. Many of the veterans couldn't even tell their families about the missions they carried out. Only in recent years have their stories begun to emerge, allowing the world to recognize their bravery and ingenuity. In 2022, the Ghost Army was finally awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the nation's highest honors. It was a long overdue recognition for the men who waged war with creativity and courage. So why does the story of the Ghost Army matter today? Because it reminds us that war isn't always won by who has the most tanks or the biggest guns. Sometimes it's won by imagination, deception, and the courage to think differently. The Ghost Army proves that intelligence and creativity can be as powerful as brute force. Their missions didn't just trick the enemy. They saved lives, shortened battles, and helped bring victory in Europe. The next time you think about World War II, remember that not every battle was fought with bullets. Some were fought with rubber tanks, paintbrushes, sound effects, and a little bit of theater. The Ghost Army may not have fired many shots, but their illusions helped shape the outcome of the war. They were the soldiers who turned deception into a weapon, and in doing so, they became legends of history. And that's the incredible story of the Ghost Army, World War II's masters of illusion.